In this video, we're going to talk about all things Chicago Marathon, including where you can get your hair braided, so that way you can have the best Chicago experience ever. Hey runners and welcome, my name is Letty from Marathon Media and I host this channel. And if you love all things marathon and running, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss any of our running news, gear reviews, training tips, and race day breakdowns. Now let's dive into today's topic. I want to give you an overview of everything this video is going to entail. If you happen to be watching this on YouTube, you can go to the timestamps and go to the sections that you prefer. If you're listening to this on a podcast, I'm sorry, you're going to be stuck with me for the next hour-ish or so, but hopefully I'll make it worth it. Alright, so in this video, we're going to just briefly touch on the history of the Chicago Marathon. We're going to talk about all things Expo. We're going to talk about the elite field. We're going to talk about pacers, cutoff times. We're going to talk about how you can watch this marathon, meaning where can you spectate, where can you watch this on television in case you decide not to go out on the course, or if you're not in Chicago. We're going to talk about how to track your loved ones. And we're going to talk about some events surrounding the Chicago Marathon, which is also where you'll find the information about getting your hair braided. Then we're going to speculate a little bit about the weather. And then last but definitely not least, I'm going to have Coach Kristen on to talk about the tips she has as a running coach on that specific marathon course, and she'll give us a full walkthrough of the course. So let's get started. Alright, so to go over a little bit of history, the first Chicago Marathon really happened in 1905, but as a modern day marathon as we know it, that race first started in 1977, and it has grown and since become one of the 7 world marathon majors. And this year Chicago is expecting 53,000 runners, so that's probably part of the reasons why we see the guaranteed entries with qualifying races getting tougher and tougher, not just for this marathon, but really all the other ones as well. Now the course of the Chicago Marathon is flat and fast. It's perfect for a Florida runner like myself. It only has 243 feet of elevation, and it is a world record setting course. I couldn't figure out whether 13 or 11 official world records have been run on the Chicago Marathon course. The latest one was Calvin Kiptum, who ran the new world record of 2 hours and 35 seconds in 2023. Unfortunately, Calvin Kiptum passed away in 2023, so we are no longer able to witness this guy's amazing races. But there have been others on the race course, and we're excited to see what will be done on the course this year. Maybe you will even set your own PR. Alright, so let's move on and talk about stuff that is practical for all of you guys. The Expo is the first and most important thing, because if you are a runner, you have to go to the Expo. If you don't go to the Expo, you do not get a bib. This year, Chicago announced that they'll be sending out packet pickup tickets. Say that 3 times. Packet pickup tickets to everyone on October 1st. You have to present that ticket at the Expo in order to be able to pick up your bib in person, and it can only be you, so make sure that you bring an ID. Now, where is the Chicago Marathon Expo? The official name of the Expo is Abbott Health and Fitness Expo, and it'll take place at McCormick Place, which is at Lakeside Center, Hall D, another tongue twister, Lakeside Center. And when you go to the Expo, you will not just receive your bib, you'll also receive a participant bib and your Nike running shirt. The Expo and official packet pickup location takes place for 3 days, from Thursday, October 9th to Saturday, October 11th. The hours are 11 to 6 on Thursday, 9 to 6 on Friday, and 9 to 6 on Saturday. Now let's talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is the elite field. I am obsessed with elite running data and all that stuff, and we have an amazing field for this Chicago Marathon. So amazing that I almost don't want to run it and just spectate, but I'm running anyway. We'll have the 2024 Chicago Marathon runner present to defend his title, John Career. He ran a 2:44 last year and has big plans for this year and hopes to run under 2:01. He also won the Boston Marathon this year, and he was the guy that you saw running, and he fell, picked up his bib, put it into his pants because it came off when he fell, shoving it into his pants and then crossing the finish line, bib in his hands. He's pretty amazing, so I'm excited to see him. Other Kenyan athletes we will see are Timothy Kiplagat, we'll see Amos Kipruto, who has won London before, and we'll see Cyprian Katut, who also podiumed this year at Boston Marathon. Super excited for that. We'll see Jacob Kiplimo, who ran a 2:03 in London this year, and many, many more exciting runners. From the American side, we'll see Connor Mantz, who is trying to have the new American record and run it in Chicago. He did run that time that was needed in Boston, which didn't count because it's not a world record eligible course, so it didn't count for the All-American record, but he's trying to get that. And if you're running a 2:05 in Boston, I mean, God knows what you're going to do in Chicago. Again, I have FOMO of not just doing media and running the course. Hopefully there'll be somebody with a megaphone, which they did do in 2023 when I was running the Chicago Marathon, when they said there was a new world record. There was a person with a megaphone. Person with a megaphone, if you're listening to this, please go out and let all of us runners know what's going on at the front end. It's amazing to share the same course with elite runners, but sometimes it's also cool to just watch it. Now, from the women's side, we do not have last year's winner present to defend her world record title because she is currently banned for using a substance that was prohibited. She's still holding the world record because there is no way to prove that she was doing anything while actually achieving the Chicago race, but she's suspended right now. We do have Dakota Pompane, formerly known as Dakota Lindworm, running, and also Lindsay Flanagan. So I'm excited to see those two ladies race, as well as, of course, many others. Now, when it comes to wheelchairs, Marcel Hoog is going to be there. And if you guys know anything about me, you know that he is my favorite athlete. He wins all these races and he's super humble about it. It's going to be great to follow him along. He's Swiss. And then Daniel Romanchuk, I love to see him and see how this race will go for him, especially after he had an incident in Tokyo where a spectator crossed the race course and made him have an accident where he hurt his shoulder. So I'm excited for him and hopefully he's better, and I'm excited to see how he does this year. From the women's wheelchair race, I'm excited to see Catherine DeBrunner and obviously Susanna Scaroni of the United States. I always love to watch a good race. Again, I'll be watching it afterwards. Now let's go back to practical stuff for you guys listening. Let's talk about race starting times. The first wave is the wheelchair wave, which starts at 7:20 a.m. on Sunday, October 12th. Then at 7:30, it's time for the elite wave to start, as well as corrals A through E. So if you're in those corrals, 7:30 is your starting time. If you're in corrals F through J, then your starting time is 8 o'clock. And if you're in corrals K through N, your starting time is 8:30. If you've never been in Chicago, the setup is that nobody is allowed in Grant Park except for runners. You have to present your bib and go through security. And of course, you can find all the items that are prohibited at security on the website for this race. But just to kind of give you an idea, liquids are usually not permitted, and you're also not allowed to have backpacks, hydration packs, but they do allow belts. Again, I'm going to link the website down there where you can find what is allowed and not. Again, make sure that you give yourself plenty of time to arrive, because there's nothing worse than having to rush to make sure that you go into your proper corral. Now let's hop into the segment where we talk about how to watch the marathon, and I'm going to start with the spectators. There's an official spectator guide available online on the Chicago Marathon website, which also will be linked below. There are some great tips in there, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. You cannot spectate from Grant Park at the starting and finish line. Only runners, again, will be allowed in that area. But the closest spot to it, I'm going to tell you, is at mile 1, which is between Grand Avenue and Jackson Boulevard. If you really want to be at the finish line, there is the Bank of America cheer zone located on Michigan Avenue and Roosevelt Road. There are some more official cheer zones, and you can find those too on the Chicago Marathon website. I'm going to just display them here briefly, and then I will also link them in the comments below. Make sure that you check out that website so you can figure out where you can cheer and let your loved ones know where that's going to be, if you're going to be on the left or right side. Trust me, a lot of times when I have people come out to cheer me on, it's always so disheartening when I don't know which side they're going to be on. The streets are super wide in Chicago, so if they don't know where you're going to be, half the time you miss them. And sometimes as a runner, it'd be nice to actually see the people that come out to see you for that extra motivation. So there's that guide. And again, keep in mind that you let your runners know if you're going to be on the left or the right side of the road. Now, if you are not going to come out to race, if you want to stay in the hotel because either it's too cold or you just don't want to go, then you can watch the Chicago Marathon on television. You can watch it on NBC5 Chicago, Telemundo Chicago, and Telexito Chicago, which they will have live coverage of this race. The broadcasting is available from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. Now, if you don't care about watching the elites, but you want to see where your runners are, you can download the Bank of America Chicago Marathon app on your phone, and then you can put in the information of your runner, find them, and then you can see a live tracking. Note that it's a live tracking, but it's not like they're wearing a GPS. There's tons of mats on the course, so every time a runner crosses a mat, it kind of gauges what your pace is and then tracks the runner until they hit the next mat. So unfortunately, if somebody stops in between the mats, you won't know about it until they don't cross the next one, but you get what I'm saying. It's a really good app though for life estimates, especially if you choose to be outside on the course. You kind of know when they're coming close, or you kind of know where to go. Chicago Marathon is a wonderful marathon to spectate because there's 3 loops. And so you can actually manage to see your runner on multiple times during a race if you choose to do so. All right, so let's move on and talk about cutoff times for this race, because obviously, like with any big race, there is going to be cutoff times because road closures cannot last forever. The Chicago Marathon has a cutoff time of 6 hours and 30 minutes, and that 6 hours and 30 minutes starts once the final wave has started. So to give you an idea what this 6:30 can mean, it's about a 15-minute mile. Unfortunately, only runners that finish within that 6 hours and 30 minutes or faster will be official finishers of the Chicago Marathon. Runners that finish after the cutoff time of 6 hours and 30 minutes might be subject to limited course support because they will take stuff down and their run will not be recorded as a completed marathon. However, the Chicago Marathon is making an effort to have medals available for every runner that does finish. Now, if you want to run the marathon with a pacer, there's tons of pacers available with finishing times as fast as 2:55, going all the way up to 6 hours. Those pacers will be wearing big flags like they always do, so you can see what the amount of time is that they are trying to get for this race. If you go to the Expo, you can find the area where the pacers are. You'll be able to talk to some of them, ask them questions, and you can also get pacing bands for your arm that have written on them the finishing time depending on what pace you intend to run. I'm making it sound more complicated, but you know what I'm talking about. Now let's talk about some official events of the Chicago Marathon. The most obviously one being the Expo. The Expo has a stage. And again, on the Chicago Marathon website, you can see that there are speakers at allotted times every single day. And if there's something that sparks your interest and you want to go listen to them, then make sure you circle that and go to the Expo at that time. I personally haven't looked at these speakers yet, but I think there's always 1 or 2 that I want to attend. Hopefully they're on Thursday or Friday, so that way I can stay off my feet a little bit more on Saturday. Now, some other events that are happening that are officially from the Chicago Marathon is the Chicago Marathon has a 5K. This 5K has now been sold out. Maybe because every time they have a Chicago Marathon 5K, they give you a beanie, and the beanies are super famous and popular. But even though it is sold out, it's really a cool 5K to spectate. I think 5Ks before a marathon are amazing because not only could they be an amazing shakeout run, but also for those loved ones that accompany you to the race, it's a fun thing to do if they don't want to run a full marathon yet. Now, another thing that sounds interesting to me is that the Chicago Marathon has an official pasta dinner. And this year's Chicago Marathon pasta dinner takes place at Millennium Hall. I've never been to one of them. It's on my bucket list, so maybe I'll go this year. Tickets are available for, I think it's $50. And again, also those tickets I'm going to link below, and they're also on the Chicago Marathon website. And now events that are not listed on the Chicago Marathon website are unofficial events. There's tons of pop-up events by brands that are not officially hosted at the Expo, but rather in the area of the Chicago Loop, which is the area around Grant Park. Those events usually have stores where you can buy their merch, Chicago-specific merch, etc. And they also host shakeout runs. I'm going to make the biggest attempt to have a list of those available on our Instagram account, maybe by the week before the Chicago Marathon, because I personally really like attending those pop-up events as well. Now on to another event that I really loved reading about when I was doing my research is that there are 2 ladies running the Chicago Marathon using a charity bib, and they are offering to braid hair. You know how when you run a marathon, sometimes we are desperately looking to get our hair braided, and they are offering that. I was super excited when I found that. So I messaged her and asked her if it was okay to share this information online, and she said, yes, absolutely. So here it is. And also linked below as an event on Facebook. You can contact her directly to figure out when and where you can get your hair braided. So that way, hair is not one of the things you're going to have to worry about during the Chicago Marathon race. I thought that was such a creative way of raising funds for this marathon as a charity. All right, so that's all that. Let's hop into the segment where I talk to Coach Kristen Smith about the Chicago Marathon, and she's going to give us a course walkthrough and her tips as a coach. All right, so I'm on here with Kristen Smith. Kristen, thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
And I'm very happy to have you back on because you have walked me through courses in the past. I think you've walked me through Boston and you've walked me through New York, and you've always provided our community with really helpful tips. So now we're going to tackle Chicago together.
Yes. Chicago's a great race, especially for, people that are American, because it's really convenient. There's no crazy time differences. Like I have a lot of people that run Berlin. It is almost the same flatness, but you have to deal with jet lag and the time difference and a lot of travel and all of that. So this is a great race for that majors environment, but also a really fast course and incredible spectators. So it really combines a lot of the best of all things. And, it's also convenient for a lot of people to get to. So
Yes. That's one of the perks I personally find, that you can just stay at the starting line, which is also the finish line. So you have that convenience of not having to be shuttled through different areas and all that.
Yes, exactly. The Grant Park start and finish, everything's really convenient. There's thousands of hotels right there in the loop. That's that area right around Grant Park. And so, for anybody that's coming with you as well, it's a really great race for them to spectate and to have supporters because they can see you multiple times. So logistics of this race are really fabulous.
Yes, absolutely. And the course is one that is very pleasant. As we know, this is the current world record course where Calvin Kipton had set I think it was 2 hours and 35-second record. Unfortunately, he passed. So now we're excited to see what other marathoners are going to do, including John Courier. What do you tell your clients about this course, how to approach this best? Maybe we can do a walkthrough.
Sure. So I break the course down. It is essentially 3 out and backs. You go north first, north to south first, then you go west to east, then you go south to north. And again, that's all sort of circling around the loop and Grant Park. So you'll go out and back in those 3 primary directions. The great thing about this course, aside from the fact that it is a lot of flat, wide avenues. You have 4 lanes across most of the course. But you're also, because you're changing directions so many times, there's no prolonged wind exposure. If you're a person who's done a point-to-point like a Boston or a New York, you could be running 26.2 miles into a headwind for the entire thing. And even though Chicago is called the Windy City, there, certainly could be some winds, but because you're changing directions with those 3 out and backs, you're really never into a headwind for any prolonged period of time. And then the same thing occurs with sun exposure. And we like we like to talk about sun exposure because of temperatures concerns as well, but also there's a perception of, if you are in the sun, even if the temperature isn't that high, just sun hitting your skin can make you feel a lot warmer than you actually are. And so that's another great thing about this course. It starts really early in the morning, so the sun is going to be low in the sky for much of the race. The other thing is you're protected and shielded from tall buildings throughout all of that downtown area, which again, you go to at 3 different points in the course going in those out and backs. And so there's a lot of shade, there's a lot of wind protection, there's a lot of great aspects to this to really have the best performance that you possibly can. And again, I think that speaks to why the world record has been set on this course. The other thing too, in terms of race logistics, it's very flat. There are only a couple of points where you are doing those elevation changes, and those primarily can be summed up in crossing the river, Chicago River. So you do that at 6 different points in the race. And those account for the majority of the elevation changes. So the elevation total is 243 feet of gain. And again, that's a quarter of the size of a New York or a Boston, which have over 800 feet of elevation gain. So that gives you a little bit of perspective, right? This is quite flat. But those bridges They're just little bumps. They're really nothing to, slow you down in any substantial way. They're not huge or miles long, like a Queensboro Bridge, which is over 2 miles long, right? So this is none of that. These are just little tiny elevation changes that give your muscles a chance to really exercise in a different way. And then the other major elevation change comes at the very end of the race. It actually comes at mile 26. And you'll hear people talk about this sort of in a joking way, but also in a serious way, purely because of where it falls. And that is, as I said, at mile 26. But, we call it Mount Roosevelt. It's not a mountain. It's not really even that big at all. But it's because it is so late into the race, it has, a coupling effect with all of the fatigue from all of those miles that you've done before. But you'll hear people talk about this. Oh, the climb at the end, this is called Mount Roosevelt. So basically there, you're just it's an overpass, okay? And it's not long and it's not big or anything like that, but you're taking a overpass over some train tracks that are below. And so that can sort of slow you down, but it is really short. You're only going to be on it for a couple of minutes. And then once you crest that, it's downhill and you make a left to the finish line. So really you can feel all of that energy and excitement and use that to get you over that quote unquote mount. In terms of like going through the course itself, I don't generally break it up in terms of landmarks or sites or anything like that, because again, there's not really a lot to distinguish it. That's no slight to Chicago, but it's a beautiful city, but a skyscraper is a skyscraper, right? It's not like, oh, at this skyscraper, I'm going to do this. The course, because it is so flat and so uniform, it really benefits from a negative split strategy, and a very slight negative split strategy, because there's no real reason to make huge elevation changes. Or pace changes due to elevation changes. So whatever your pace is overall, your goal pace for the race, you're basically going to stick pretty close to that with some only small variations, maybe 5 or 10 seconds. And I just recommend everybody, this is just an overall marathoning tip, really, is that people start out conservatively. And that's why I say that negative split strategy, but on the slight side. So we're not trying to do like 5-minute negative split. We're really trying to do something more like a 1-minute negative split. The other reason that this course and this race lends itself to that is that those early miles, really the first 5K to 10K, is going to be quite crowded just because of the number of people all starting with you. And this race has grown substantially over the years. I first ran it in 2018, actually, and they had just over 40,000 people. This year, they've been growing every single year, but post-COVID especially. And so this year, they're going to have over 50,000 people. Now, I don't really think it's a problem because, again, these are huge, wide avenues with 4 lanes of roadway to use. However, it is certainly going to be more congested in those early miles. And that, again, is fine because a marathon is a very, very long race. And so you don't need to go out exactly at pace. If you're 10 seconds over on that first 5K or the first 10K, that's fine. You can use that energy later in the race. It's going to clear out. You are going to have a lot more room, and you're going to be able to coast easier without trying to fight through people or without trying to zig and zag around, right? So it's all about conservation of energy early on. Then once you cross that halfway point, then you can really start to use up anything that you have left.
Okay, wonderful. So we've talked about the negative splitting. And with that, what are your suggestions? You mentioned pacing not being off by more than 5 to 10 seconds. When you are pacing yourself in Chicago, though, I had this bump, and this is a pretty much well-known bump, that you don't have good GPS reception at the start.
Yes, that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So the skyscrapers that help you, that protect you from the elements, protect you from the sun and the wind and all of that, they do create all kinds of havoc with your watch and with tracking your data. So I recommend everybody manually split their watches. Especially if you have like a Garmin or a Coros, these watches, and they even have free programs you can download with no additional cost that will help you track and adjust for any GPS changes. So I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I'll tell you the one that I use for my Garmin. It's called Race Screen. And you set it up to manually lap at all of the mile markers, or you can choose whatever. Do it at the 5Ks if you run in Ks. And you lap it there. It will adjust your watch and your splits to exactly what that mile marker is when you hit it, and it will tell you exactly what you were doing. So that is hugely beneficial. But if, say, you're running with something else, you can even run with just a basic Timex watch. You can run with your Apple Watch without any apps or anything like that. All you need is your elapsed time, what your elapsed goal time is, and like a pace band or something like that. Don't hit start whilst you're walking up to the starting line, but exactly when you're crossing the timing mats at the starting line, hit start on your watch, and then that tracking in that time will match exactly to your chip time. So for instance, whatever your target time is, say you want to hit the 10K in 41 minutes. When you're crossing the 10K point on the course, you look at your watch and you say, does it say 41 minutes or does it say like 40 minutes, 35 seconds, right? So then you can know, okay, I'm ahead, or you can know you're a little bit behind. And so, you can manually do all of these things without any special technology or anything like that. Even like on a big, it's certainly easier if you have like a round number. Like if you're targeting 3:30 and that's 8 minutes a mile, you can look at your watch and see like, okay, have 8 minutes gone by since the last time I was I was crossing a mile marker, right? That's a little bit easier, but Chicago does give you a pace band. Actually, it's a pace tattoo. It's a special Nike thing. I just find it interesting because I have tried to use it before, and it's a cool idea, but you have to make sure you put it on well. And if you don't put it on well, because it is a tattoo, it can be a little weird on your arm, or it can get a little messed up. But you can because I've been running for a while, I've done some really old school basic conventional things where like I literally just write what my overall time splits are on a little note card, and I quote unquote laminate it with packing tape, with clear packing tape, right? So you don't have to be fancy. You don't have to have a special pace band. You don't have to order anything or do a tattoo or any of that kind of stuff. But you can do it really, really basically. But absolutely, you want to know where you are on the course in relation to what your target time is, and know how far ahead or behind you are, because the GPS will be off. Actually, I was just funny because when I did run this race in 2018, this is the longest marathon I've ever tracked, because my GPS was insane. And this was a long time. So this is like old technology, right? But in 2018, I actually tracked 28 miles for this course. My watch was doing crazy things. Like it was showing me I was running a 4-minute mile at some places. And it was doing crazy, right? Because of the GPS. I did run the race again in 2023, and there were some smaller issues, but it wasn't anywhere near as crazy as, the 5 years prior to that. But so things have improved, I think, with technology and what's available, but you should absolutely prepare to have GPS do weird things, because again, a lot of this race, you go to the center of Chicago itself, which is all tall skyscrapers, really dense urban landscape there.
Yes, yes. And I can attest to that because I too got an accidental PR running this race. I literally was trying to see if I could run sub 8-minute pace, and I kept pushing and pushing, and my watch was just telling me 8:05, 8:05. And so then I crossed the halfway mark at like, I think it was 1:34. And I was like, oh, I'm in trouble. And then I had a huge positive split for that race. So somebody had mentioned it at the starting line. Some lady was telling her friend, oh, you should manually set the time, or, you know, manually lap every mile. And I didn't know what they meant, but I'm a quick learner after that race.
Yes. Yeah. So because I've done a number of international races, and also due to the elevation changes on courses like New York City or Boston, but I track and time myself by the 5Ks. And so I always know in my head what my 5K target time is, 21 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, 24 minutes. And so every time I hit the 5K on course, I just hit the lap, and it shows you exactly what it is. It's like 22:30 or whatever. And so for me, I like not having the stress of checking every single mile. So I prefer to space it out over the 5Ks, but the same principle exists, right? So whatever, denomination you want to use, know what it is, and cross-reference that to the course itself. But again, it's relatively simple. There's not a lot of elevation changes. Whatever your target is, that should be your target, So if it's 8 minutes a mile, go for 8 minutes a mile. If you're 8:03, you're fine. If you're 8:50 or 7:55, again, you're fine. Like just right around that, and you're going to be right on target. But really resist the urge to go out too fast. That's the thing that's the trap that a lot of people fall into. And it's easy to do that because the energy of this race is huge, right? There's a lot of anticipation. You're going to be surrounded by people. The spectators, especially as I mentioned in that inner urban core there, the spectator support is going to be humongous. Like there are parts where you go out, you get further out on the course. It does, the spectators do sort of dissipate a little bit, but right in the middle, you're going to feel like a rock star. So you have to fight the urge a little bit to take all of that energy and go crazy and run 5K PR, 10K, but it's so use that energy to keep you motivated and happy, but not to run too fast.
Perfect. Perfectly said. Thank you for that. And you also mentioned earlier, we have 3 in and outs. And with that, I'm assuming, I've run it. I know there's a lot of turns. So what can you tell us about the tangents on the course?
Yeah, so the tangent line is marked. That's a blue line, and that is the shortest distance. That's the measured distance. In my experience, there's not really the opportunity to run on the tangent line because there's so many people. And so, if you can, great. But if there's also, you're in a pack and there's 1,000 people around you, I wouldn't spend energy pushing, I wouldn't get in a fight to run on the tangent line. But as you go along in those later miles, it does tend to space out a lot more. So, you may find yourself, at mile 15, 16, and it really has cleared out a lot. And then you can run the tangent line without burning through energy and without getting into a fist fight trying to push your way onto it, right? In those early sections, you're probably not going to be able to. And for me, I don't think it's worth the energy burn to try to stay on it. The aid stations are plentiful. They're very long, but they're also to the sides of the course, right? So for me, in terms of energy usage and in terms of feeling good later in the race, I would rather hit every single aid station and make sure I'm well fueled, well hydrated, have all the electrolytes that I need. So I would rather be in a good position for all of those than try to concentrate on running 100% on the tangent line. Because that's where I feel like I will fall down and lose more energy, as opposed to like, oh, I didn't cut that, I cut that turn 0.02 over, like I'd rather make up the distance and have the energy from fueling and hydrating properly. But if you're in a position, let's say you're in a position where you can do all of the things, there's a blue line. It is painted clearly on the roadway, so you can just follow it. You know what? You turn your brain off and just follow that line if you have that option. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. I like that tip because, it's always with all these runners out there, sometimes you don't even see the blue line, right?
Yeah.
So that's that.
Yeah.
All right. So
exactly. You may not know it's there.
Yeah. All right. So as a coach, I'm going to ask you, what tips, just in general, do you give your clients when it comes to fueling for the marathon, just strictly during the race?
Yes. So hopefully everybody has been training and practicing fueling, because this is one of the most important things. You have to train your gut. You have to train your stomach the same way you have to train your legs, right? If you try giving your stomach something totally foreign and something totally new you've never done before, it's probably not going to go well. There's a chance maybe it'll be okay, but it's not a guarantee, right? So hopefully we've practiced all of these things. So know what works for you. The fuel on course is going to be Morton, energy gels, and then they also have bananas. Those are all later in the race, the banana stations, and I really do, personally, I'm a banana fan, so I like that. But if you're a person who has never used Morton before, do not use it for the first time on race day. Bring your own and use what you know works for you, because these things are very specific. And so whatever you're used to, whatever you've done in training, this is a repeat of that. Hopefully you've been fueling throughout your long runs and you know to fuel early and often. Really, I try to tell people every 30 to 40 minutes, depending on your pace. That could come, some people do it by miles. I don't like saying that, because my 30 minutes, maybe 3 miles, and your 30 minutes, maybe 2 miles, or whatever, the mileage is, but the pace difference makes a different, equation. So really, I like to do it by time, because your body knows time. Your body is burning through a certain amount of calories based on how long you're out there and how fast you're running, right? So the more intense and the longer, the greater the carbohydrate needs are, because your energy is just being burned through, right? And so hopefully you have, again, practiced all of this. You have an idea of what that formula is. There's a big trend to higher carb intake. There's a lot of studies, especially on the elite side, where they're really they're pounding carbs. And I just point this out because I think it's interesting, because when I was first getting into marathoning and running, this number has changed threefold over the years. So what I started with and what I learned, what I started doing is irrelevant. If you said that, what I learned in the beginning, if you repeated that now, people will be like, what are you talking about? Because it's outdated. But if you're not used to that higher carb intake, then you shouldn't make race day the first time that you do it, right? But certainly what they've learned is that we can tolerate more carbs than previously thought, and that is also quite beneficial, because again, the idea is that the intensity, it's not an easy run intensity. It's a higher intensity than that, but it's sub-threshold. So it's in between that. And that requires a greater energy expenditure.
Okay, perfect. I love how you said that with the timing. That's how I've been training too. And I think you actually told me that, but perfect. So anyway, I have 2 more questions for you before we come to the end of this. The mental wall. What are your personal tips for when you are in a race like that, where I love Chicago, it's fast, but it also gets a little bit mundane. The scenery starts looking the same, and then you're just out there running and you're getting tired. What do you tell yourself to break through that?
Yes. I'll tell you actually specifically with Chicago, because there's an out and back where you're running out next to the people going back at the very, very end. It is at exactly from mile 22 to mile 24. And that for me those are like the hardest miles of any marathon ever, right? But like once you get close enough to the end, you're like, oh, I'm almost there. But that part is really tricky. And you have that visual there of seeing the people going back, and you're going out and you're like, the marathon feels like forever at that point, right? So what I like to do is I just block them out. I'm like, I don't even see them. They're going to be on your left-hand side when you're going out. I focus on myself. I focus on exactly what is in front of me and ahead of me and what I can control. So I do certain things about like, pick up your feet. I give myself little mental reminders to continue having good form and to utilize all the muscles that are available to you. So I give myself reminders about things like moving my arms, right? Your arms can help propel you forward. So I like, okay, move my arms, let my arms help me. Make sure I'm like utilizing my glutes, picking up my knees, right? Instead of that slow shuffle. The other thing I like to do is I like to pick out a person ahead of me that in my head is like the rock star, and they're like driving through the crowd and like, going for home and strong. And I use that person and I say, I'm tacking myself onto the back end of that person and I'm going to let them pull me along. Right. So I like to have this tunnel vision where it's just like, I just got to focus on what's ahead of me and make sure that my body is operating as optimally as possible. And that's what I like to do in those really, really tough miles. There's certain other points where you can like draw on the spectator support. And I think the points where I personally like to do that is around like mile 25.5 or mile 26, mile 26, where you're close enough to the end that you can start to like use the energy and that anticipation to get you through, right? Because you're so close, it's 10 minutes or whatever it is. At that point, I think I'm okay to start to look outward. But in those later miles, like 21, 22, 23, 24, I really do that tunnel vision, narrow it down and say, I have to grind. I have 35, 40 minutes, whatever it is for you, 50 minutes. I have to get through this and I want to be as strong and as focused as possible. So I do the method of like, just tunnel down, focus on myself, focus on something ahead of me, use little, instead of trying to break it down into miles, I use little landmarks in front of me, like just get to that tree, just get to the stop sign, just get to the next block, just get to that next turn. Because there are so many turns in this, that is one of those things that's really beneficial where you can just say, okay, I'm just going to get up to that turn and then I'm going to, when I turn left, I'll face that, right? And so breaking it up into smaller pieces, because the miles, the early miles, they fly by. It was like, oh, where did the first 10 miles go? I have no idea. Then those later miles, it's like, this feels like an hour. How am I still running? Like I'm in mile 23, it's taking an hour. How is this possible, right? The time warps itself. So, breaking it down into whatever is manageable to just get you through it, like breadcrumb your way.
Love it. Love it. So much good stuff in that. And now last but not least, global warming exists and there might be some chances that this race temperature is not the ideal temperature in the 40s like we've seen in the recent years. There's always that one year. In case that happens this year, and I don't want to jinx it, but in case that does happen, how should runners adjust their pace? Because they don't want to go out the same, fast pace and then all of a sudden be slammed with that.
No. So I'm glad you asked this because I saw so many people in Berlin. We just saw this. It just happened, right? Horrible race day, 80-degree temperatures. Chicago has had horrible conditions before. Knock on wood, it doesn't happen this year. But You have to adjust from the very beginning. I know so many people that are like, they just went out and they let conditions get to them before they adjusted. This is incorrect because you are going to dig yourself into a deep well that then you have to try to claw your way out of or survive through. And instead, if you're conservative from the very beginning, do not cross that start line without adjusting your pace. Conditions dictate what your pace should be, right? And what is possible. If you have great conditions and ideal conditions and temperatures are great, then you run your exact target pace. If conditions are less than ideal in any way, then you have to adjust, and it should be from the very jump, right? So mile 1 is slower. And the great thing about this, it's hard to do. People are resistant to it because I think a lot of times people convince themselves, they're like, well, it won't affect me. It's like, I promise it affects everybody because we are not robots. We are human beings and the body works the same way, right? If it's hot, your body is going to be working extremely hard to cool itself down. You have a maximum core temperature that your body can sustain with active activity. It's across the board, right? You don't get to opt in or out. It's not a checkbox like, oh, I just decided I'm not going to be subject to that today. No. So if you adjust early on, you start out conservatively, you're still going to suffer, but that suffering should come very, very late, right? We don't want to suffer and hit the wall midway through. We don't want to suffer and have to walk or end up in a medical tent, right? Like there are serious health consequences that can happen from this. And so I really, really urge people to be conservative for a while. Go out slower than your target pace. And then if you're feeling good and if it somehow ends up being like, hey, it's not so bad, or the clouds come out, at mile 20, then you still have energy, cool, that's great. Go for broke in your last 10K, right? But if you go for broke out of the gate, you're setting yourself up for a potential failure and also, again, health concerns, like serious health concerns. So adjust early when you have the opportunity to find your way through that obstacle in those difficult circumstances. And again, nobody wants that, but we can't control it. So sometimes you have to just take what is given to you, right? It's not what you asked for. It's not what you trained for. It's not what you deserve, but it is what you have. And so you have to face it head on and with the reality of, this is what I need to do to get through this in the best way, unscathed.
Awesome. I love this. And, for anyone listening, obviously ideal race conditions would be awesome. But if they don't happen, you have an excuse to sign up for the next race. So keep that in mind. You can make that A-goal race into a B-goal race and then, just kind of move on. But thank you, Kristen, so much. I really appreciate all your input. And maybe you can let us know how people can find you if they like you as a person and want you to be their coach.
Yes. Well, I am online. I have socials. I have a website. But I will spell my first name because it's different. And if you search it the wrong name, then you won't find me. But it's Kristyn. And the last name is Smith. But I'm on Instagram at KRISRS. That's my handle. And then I have a website, which is CoachChrisRS.com.
Perfect. And we will link that in our show notes. Kristen, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So that was the walkthrough with Kristen. Hopefully you retain a few of her tips because I think they are super helpful. Now, as to my own one tip that I have is a very obvious one. If it's a cold day, then you're going to want to bring layers. The Chicago Marathon, just like all the other marathons, will have bins available and all the clothing that you discard will be donated to a good cause. So make sure that you layer up because there's nothing worse than being cold right before your race. So last but not least, let's talk about the weather a little bit. It's still a little bit early to speculate. I'm filming this video on September 25. So we're still about 12, 13 days out. As of now, the high temperature on race day is supposed to be 57 degrees and the low 50 degrees, which is Still really good running temperatures. We have to keep an eye on it. Hopefully we'll not have an incident like the Berlin weather going up to 77 degrees early in the morning. Who knows what's going to happen? But keep in mind what Coach Kristen said. Make sure that you adjust your pace accordingly so you can still have an amazing race and not let the weather ruin this for you. Just remember, everybody is running under the same weather conditions as you are. And that's all we can say for now. We're definitely going to keep an eye on the weather. And I think that's all I got for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully this video was helpful. And if it was, let me know. Make sure you subscribe for future content. I love doing coverage of all the marathon majors, especially with all these new ones coming up. I think it's really fun, and hopefully, again, it is helpful. I wish you the best race, happy taper, and until next time.